Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Wednesday, March 27th, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about what we've been up to at the water cooler. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writers Hoai-Tran
Hey, everyone.
and Chris Evangelista.
Hello, folks.
So it's been a week and a half since we've last done this. Hopefully this won't go long. Let's just dive into it and start talking. What have we been doing? This past weekend I went to Disneyland. It's the first time I've been there in a couple months, actually. I haven't been going lately. And I tried to do some... You know, I'm a big fan of a lot of theme park video bloggers on YouTube. I follow a bunch of people like the Tim Tracker, who we've mentioned on this podcast, World of Micah, Adam the Woo. Those are some good people that I highly recommend. So I've been thinking a lot lately, like, you know, of chronicling my journeys to Disneyland. And I kind of did a test of that, tried to do some video blogging through my Instagram stories when I was there this weekend, and guys, it's hard. Video blogging is not easy. I'm not sure I am cut out for it. It is really hard to capture interesting things while they're happening and not be on your phone during the non-interesting times. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel it's just, and it's also, you gotta like kind of put yourself out there as a character on the story that is not usually a person I am. But Ben, I know you have some experience doing this with your vacations, but you're not really doing video blogging. It's more of like I don't know, a tonal piece of your events. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's why or part of the reason why I do the videos, why my wife and I do them the way that we do them is so we don't have to address the camera or be like narrating what's going on. It's just easier to sort of present and let the footage speak for itself and just like throw a music track underneath it. But I mean, yeah, it's a whole different kind of art, I guess, to vlogging.
Yeah. And watching it every day like I do, the people like the Tim Tracker and his wife Jen, they make it look so easy. Like, it looks like they're just like taking out the camera and videotaping along with their day, but it's not easy. But I was thinking, you know, the opening of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge is coming up in a month and a half or so. And I have a hotel room, which should give me access to Galaxy's Edge on opening day. If I don't get invited to a press day before then, which I have not gotten any word on that. So probably not. I don't know. Disneyland hates us for some reason. But I was thinking, like, how do I cover this? Because it's supposed to be a timed entry to this land. And I'm, like, worried that I'm going to be my first experience in Batuu is going to be me, like, taking notes to, like, you know, taking photos, trying to, like, put together a piece for the site. And I was thinking maybe it would be cooler for me to bring my iPhone and do it as a video blog of, like, you know, just like you experiencing my experiences, and I would cut that down later. But is that a disaster waiting to happen, Ben?
I was just going to say, how many people do you think are going to be there I don't know how many people at the park it's going to be able to hold on that day.
Oh, I don't know.
But it's like the percentage of people who are going to be there who are going to be vlogging is got to be astronomically high because it's the opening day. So in the background of every single one of your shots, it's going to be 15 people talking to their own cameras. So, I mean, that could be...
But I want to give our readers and our listeners a way to experience this from home in some way. And, like, I feel like doing it in text and photos might be...
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. I think it would certainly be an interesting way for people to experience the insanity of what it's going to be like there on opening day. And you can't really capture that in any other way other than video. I'm just saying, for you on the ground, you're going to be presented with some serious obstacles. But if you're willing to try to overcome those, then I think the experience would probably be worth it for people who are interested.
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna try to get there. I have a month and a half to get there. Jacob, what have you been doing this week?
Well, as people listening to this podcast know, I've been dieting over the past 3 months, and I've decided to double down on my efforts not to die before I'm 50. So that means I bought some additional exercise equipment, installed a miniature gym in my garage, and I started taking multivitamins and other specific vitamins and turmeric pills and fish oil and fiber and other things, and exercising every other day, both weightlifting and cardio. And I this may be news to people like us who sit around our butts and write and watch movies all day, but when you do this, you actually feel really good physically, and you wake up each morning not in pain, and you like look forward to your days and have like a bright, clear head. I mean, who knew? Who knew that all this stuff was good for you, Peter?
Who knew? The only thing I'm going to say, Jacob, is don't get discouraged if it appears like you're not losing the weight after you've started working out. For a while there, you're going to be gaining some muscle. And it's maybe those shirts are not going to look like they're becoming, baggier.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, so
it's one of the reasons why I'm not weighing myself for this diet. I'm just going by physical resemblance, physical comparison only, and we'll see. Like maybe those few weeks where I look bulkier, but hopefully in a good way. Who knows? Maybe this time next year, Peter, I'll be like all hulked out, and I'll be like the slash film writer who can like break bricks with his fists. Who knows?
I want to see that for sure. Okay, let's move on to what we've been reading. Chris, what have you been reading this week?
When I was in Austin for Pet Sematary, Jacob was nice enough to gift me the first volume of Killer Be Killed, the comic by Ed Brubaker. And it's great. I read it in one day because it's not too long, and now I have to go out and buy all the other. I think there's like 3 more volumes. I have to get them all now because I'm pretty hooked. It's a good read. It's very angsty and pulpy, and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
I also love this comic. It's very Fight Club-esque, I would probably say. So if you like things like Fight Club, or even like Chuck Palahniuk's kind of stuff, like not that he's involved in this, but I feel like it's kind of in that same vein, or in that same corner of the room. Ben, what have you been reading this week?
I got an early look at a new book called The Art and Making of the Handmaid's Tale, which is written by Andrea Robinson. And as the title suggests, this book is all about, it's sort of defined as the official companion to the Hulu MGM TV series, The Handmaid's Tale. I've read that book. I really enjoy that show. So I was interested to see what this book could tell me that I didn't already know. And there's a bunch of interviews in here with, Margaret Atwood, who wrote the original novel that the show is based on, and all of the people involved with the series. It's really, really good. I'm not completely done with it yet, but I think, for anybody who's a fan of the show, this book is worth checking out. There's a ton of like concept art and little, pieces of like photos of like swatches of colors that they were using. There's a lot of discussion about how the different colors were chosen for the show, and the show has such a distinct color palette. There's interviews with Reeve Morano, who directed the first 3 episodes of the show and sort of established the visual look of the entire series. But there's also some stuff in there that I didn't know. Like Morano, who is a cinematographer in her own right, directed those first 3 episodes, but she used the cinematographer of The Fall, the Tarsem Singh movie from 2006, which I did not realize. So that was a kind of a cool little piece of trivia. And then there's a bunch of like little stuff that I even a very serious viewer of the show, somebody who pays a lot of attention to all the little details of the show, might not recognize. Like the handmaids in the show have these ear tags where they're tagged by the overlords in Gilead. And each of these tags has a number on it. And Offred's tag, June, the character played by Elizabeth Moss, her number is 1985, which is the year that the book came out. And I've never noticed that before. So it's, there are a lot of these little sort of almost Easter egg kind of details sprinkled throughout this book. And it's called The Art and Making of the Handmaid's Tale, and it comes out on May 14th. So if you're a fan of the show, maybe check that out.
Yeah. On Monday, we talked a bit about the Apple keynote and their announcement for Apple TV Plus. One of the other things they announced on that keynote was that they were adding an Apple News Plus to their news app. And this is basically, they bought Texture, which was this app that let you read. It's basically Netflix for magazines. And they're offering a 30-day free trial to anybody. So I decided, why not? I'm going to test this out. So I signed up for the 30-day free trial, which obviously after 30 days ends up charging me $9.99 a month. But it gives you access to almost 300 different publications. Things like GQ, Time Magazine, Entertainment Weekly, Wired, Vanity Fair, New Yorker, Esquire, Men's Health, Variety. Like, those are amongst the things in my magazine collection that I'm taking a look at. And I will say that I am liking and hating this app so far. One cool thing is a lot of these magazines have re-edited the way that the page looks for the iPhone, so it's very easy to read on the go, which I like. Before it was very like magazine-like. But on the other hand, Apple it's not the best UI in the world, and it like to add a magazine to your magazine rack, or I guess it's called My Magazines. It should be called Magazine Rack. It takes you 3 different clicks, and you basically have to know that something's there. It's like a very hard to get to thing. It should be like a one-click thing. I don't think it's ready for prime time, and also the recommendations. Like, the thing about this that I thought was kind of cool is they have recommendations for articles, which is recommending to me like some articles from Time Magazine and Money and Cosmo, I guess. Your money horoscope of the month of April. I can read that. That's what it's recommending to me. I don't know why, but one of the things I'm kind of disappointed is there are ways in this app for me to follow things I like. So I'm following Star Wars. I'm following Marvel. I'm following the keto diet. Yeah, I'm following things like that. But it is not recommending to me articles on Star Wars from all these publications. Like, I feel like I want to see the latest Star Wars article for, that whenever it's published in these publications. I feel like they have a ways to go with the recommendation engine here. But I would recommend check it out. It's worth checking out. I would not use this as a newsreader. I'd use it just for the magazines. The newsreader kind of stinks. But interested to see if any of you guys end up trying this. But Brad, you've been reading some comic books?
I read a single comic book. It's something that I bought a while back because I accidentally found out about it. Every now and then I'll go search on eBay for like vintage classic Saturday Night Live type memorabilia, stuff that you can't really easily find anymore, and that isn't readily available in like collectible shops or anything like that. And while I was searching, I found out that there was once a comic book in 1974, I think it was, October 74, where one of the Marvel team-up issues had Spider-Man working with the Not Ready for Primetime Players, which was the original name for the cast of Saturday Night Live. And I didn't even realize that this was a thing that existed. So I just had to buy it just to see what it was like. And so, like, it's a classic comic, obviously. So it's old school, and it's very odd, but it features all of the cast members from the original Saturday Night Live cast: Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Jane Curtin, Garrett Morris, Bill Murray, Lorraine Newman, Gilda Radner, and the host of the episode is Stan Lee. And the premise is that Peter Parker and Mary Jane got tickets to see the live show of Saturday Night Live, so they're going to the show, and they get there, and you see the background details of the live show happening with the cast and stuff, and John Belushi gets this weird ring sent to him that he thinks is some kind of like fan mail gift or something, but it's something that the Silver Samurai is after, and the Silver Samurai busts into SNL and is trying to get this ring, and Spider-Man has to try and stop him, and like the cast of SNL helps by like creating these distractions, and like they're like Lorraine Newman and Garrett Morris are dressed up as Ms. Marvel and Thor at one point to try and trick Silver Samurai into thinking that more superheroes are there. And it's such a weird novelty thing, and it was so fun to read through. And there's even like little fun random Easter egg stuff, like when in the big splash page panel in the issue when Stan Lee is introducing that he's the host of Saturday Night Live, and Peter Parker and Mary Jane are just getting to the show in their balcony seats. There's two characters situated behind them who call each other Statler and Waldorf, so which is a reference to the critic characters, the old men from the Muppets, which I thought was just random and funny. But yeah, it was just a fun thing to read. I bought this a while back, and then I hadn't opened it up to read it, and I recently got it back out because I've been getting some stuff organized that has been disorganized in my new place. So I actually just opened up and read through it, and it was just a fun, silly read.
I think Marvel still does these kind of like ridiculous side things. I know Penn and Teller were recently in a run of of Deadpool. Like it was the Deadpool teaming up with Penn and Teller. It's weird. Jacob, do you have any experience with these like strange spin-off kind of episodes?
Yeah, I mean, the most famous ones are from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, of course. But I know recently there was this incredibly strange, baffling even set of comics where each superhero was teamed up with a different Looney Tunes character for like a bunch of these individual one-off issues. I can't remember the rest, who all the pairings were. But remember, it was like Elmer Fudd and Batman, and it was one of the pairings. I didn't read them, but they still happen. They still exist, and they're I don't know who reads them, but they must sell to these people who want the novelty factor because they're out there.
I've actually stumbled across like some details about those comics in doing superhero bits, and apparently they're really good for like I guess they do some cool, interesting things, and how they bring the Looney Tunes characters into like the DC comics universe, and like they sound really weird, but there's some cool ideas, I guess. I don't know, people seem to really like them.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to what we've been watching. I will start things off. Last week, Chris was talking about this documentary on HBO, Alex Gibney's The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. And this is about a woman in Silicon Valley named Elizabeth Holmes, who led a Silicon Valley startup that raised nearly $1 billion on the concept that was found out not to be feasible. And it turned out in the end she was lying and is now potentially going to jail for fraud, right? And that's the real life headlines. I didn't really know anything about this until Chris brought this up, but apparently this has been a huge thing. There's a book, there's a podcast. This has been mainstream news. I'm not usually a fan of Alex Gibney's documentaries. I know like he's a beloved person in the documentary world. I feel like his Scientology documentary just scratches the surface. Usually his stuff is more talking heads than showing anything, and I feel like that's the worst a documentary can be. I want to use the medium of film in a cinematic way, and I want to see. I don't want to be told about things happening. I want to see things happening. This documentary, however, he got access to a lot of inside footage from all hands on meetings inside the company, interviews with Elizabeth from throughout the years. Although he doesn't interview her for this documentary directly, it is a fascinating story. I think in the end, this documentary is kind of surface level and doesn't really go too deep into it. I wish it was. I don't know. From Chris's setup of this, I was expecting this to be such a malicious, to be kind of like what Firefest was, and the guy behind that.
I think you misunderstood me, Peter, because I actually talked about the book, not the documentary. That's
were you talking about the book?
Yes, and the book, I do agree. I did watch this documentary, though, and I do agree it's very surface level, even though I enjoyed it, but the book is so much deeper, and I'm currently reading the book now.
I'm sorry about the confusion there, then.
No, that's fine.
But I do feel like I was going into it expecting her to be like this gigantic liar, and it feels to me like, I mean, she is a liar. I'm not going to defend her in any case. She went, she squandered $1 billion based on lies, but I feel like it's this gray area where she believed that this was possible. And there's many inventors out there. They even say in this documentary that like Edison, who was her like one of the people that she looked up to, you know, would often promise these huge things that were not believed to be achievable and get to the goal before the deadline. That is status quo for Silicon Valley, but it is obvious in the later part of this documentary that she was acting off of fear and making saying things that were not accurate in order to keep things going, and that's dishonest, and that is definitely wrong. It is a fascinating story to me, but I don't think it's I'm wondering what you think, Chris, because I don't feel like it's her intentions were initially malicious. I feel like she actually thought that they were going to get there, even though people were telling her it wasn't possible.
Yeah. If I had just seen this documentary without reading the book, like I started the book before I watched the documentary, I would probably agree with you. But I would really recommend, if you have the time, Peter, to get the book or even listen to the podcast, because the podcast is based on the book. But the book goes into so much more detail about how like manipulative and just full of shit she is. And I don't know if she knew she's full of shit or she's like delusional, if it's like that Trumpian thing where you think you're great at everything even though you're clearly not. Like, it might just be that she's just narcissistic and she really thought she could pull all this stuff off even though she really couldn't. But the book goes a lot more into detail about how how much terrible stuff this company was doing, and just constantly, like, basically anytime someone caught onto them in the company and was like, I don't know about this, she would just fire them. So that sort of makes me think she knew what she was doing, because the minute anyone was like, this isn't going to work, she'd be like, guess what? You're fired. So that to me makes me think she, at least on some level, didn't want anyone to like call her out on her bullshit.
Since you weren't talking about the documentary, what did you think of the documentary itself?
It's fine. I do agree. Like, Alex Gibney, he knows how to make very entertaining documentaries, but he does only scratch the surface. The same thing with the Scientology thing. Like, I had read the Going Clear book first before I saw the documentary, and he leaves so much stuff out. Like, I don't know if it's just the nature of, like, he wants to make it not like a 10-hour documentary, but there's a lot of stuff he doesn't cover, and I don't know why he chooses to do that way. At the same time, there are a few Alex Gibney docs I really like, but this probably isn't his best. But if you're curious to learn like the bare bones of this story, I would recommend watching it. But then I would really recommend picking up the book, which is called Bad Blood, which is really good.
I really don't have time to read a book these days, so I still haven't read Blake Harris's book, which has been sitting on my table, but I might try to listen to the podcast. I have a lot of time, on the go, so I'm gonna try to check that out. Okay, another thing we binge watched over the series, or over one day. We binge watched the OA Part 2. Has anybody else here seen any of the OA? I'm assuming not.
And once I heard the ending of season 1, I swore I would never watch it, but I'm ready to be convinced, Peter.
My wife and I watched, I think, the first 2 episodes of the first season, and we're like, this is just not for us. So we stopped, even before it got to the insanity of what apparently happens at the end of season 1.
Well, I just love everything that Britt Marling and her co-conspirator, Zal Batmangui, he was the guy that did the Sound of Your Voice, or Sound of My Voice, which was a huge hit at Sundance and South by Southwest Film Festival. He wrote The East, which I liked at Sundance. And the OA is totally in that same style. It is taking these huge sci-fi concepts, but grounding it in a character-driven reality, making you asking weird questions of you, of this world, of these characters. Are they telling the truth? Are they being misled? What is real? This, I feel like, even more so than Westworld, this is a show that kind of recaptures what I felt with Lost. And I do think it is too weird for its own good. I do feel like most people that liked Lost would not like this show, and I totally understand why, Ben, you wouldn't. Well, I don't understand why you'd give up after 2 episodes. I feel like the first couple episodes were really good in that first season, but it does get to some really strange places, which, you heard what happened at the end of the first season, Jacob. It is, I don't know, it wears its heart on its sleeve. It tries to put these ideas out there, and sometimes they look ridiculous, but it's, the show is so ambitious. Every episode of the season has batshit crazy things that happen that potentially jump the shark. Like, so crazy that, every episode, Kitra was looking at me and was like, did this series jump the shark? And then, 20 minutes later, she was reinvested in it. I wish I could say some things about this episode, but or about the season, but I feel like it is spoilers because it happens in the later half of the season. But I mean, Jacob, should I?
I don't know. I edited the spoiler review that we ran on slashfilm.com, written by Josh Meyer.
Yeah.
And so I can, even though I haven't seen the episodes, I can attest that they are indeed something special. I'll put it that way.
I will say there's some Lovecraftian influences here that were unexpected. There's an octopus. I won't say much more. The ending of this season might be the craziest, most ridiculous ending to any season finale I've ever seen on television. And by that, I don't mean it's good. I'm not even sure if it's good. I'm not even sure it's bad, but it sure is crazy. And I want to see what the third season is going to look like. This show is, I'm not sure I love this show, but I really enjoy it, and I really love how weird and ambitious it is, and I wish more people would go on this roller coaster ride, because it's worth going on in my mind, even though I don't think it nails the landing on every single thing. It definitely doesn't. I feel like if you have problems with a movie like Jordan Peele's Us, you'll have tons of problems with this show. But speaking of Us, I did rewatch Us. I talked about that yesterday on the podcast. But I know, Jacob, you also rewatched Us.
Yeah, watching it with my wife last night. She hadn't seen it yet. And that movie is even better on a second viewing. You start to pick up so much. And I love how it made me think that everything everybody has said about it on these podcasts is both strengthened and weakened at the same time. Like, I feel even more insecure in my position while feeling more secure in it at the same time. And I just love how a movie is committed enough in its view that we all get an idea what it's about, but just loose enough that we can all circle that idea in our own way and apply our own perspective. And the little details and the little setups and payoffs, both visually and character and story-wise, that you don't catch till the second time, are just sublime. It's a movie that rewards second viewing so much.
Yeah. HT, you're the only one on this podcast that has not talked about Us on this podcast. Without going into spoilers, because I think we'll have enough time at some point. We got a lot of emails to theorize more and have you on and talk about that kind of stuff. What did you think of the film?
I really enjoyed Us. It's such a haunting and unsettling and truly audacious movie that kind of preys on our primal fear of the other. And I like agreeing with what Jacob said about how it rewards you for kind of going deeper than its surface level. And I like that too, that you can kind of enjoy it as a straight up horror film while going deeper and going into its various details. It's just a movie that's really interesting to me because I didn't expect it to be quite as, I guess the word is meticulous in terms of just the various elements and the sort of plot twist that you have. It feels like those the story structure is more something that is along the lines of like a sci-fi, whereas the overall message is something that is a little bit grander and a little bit more amorphous than that. And I like that a lot. And I just really enjoy when movies, like especially mainstream studio movies like Us, swing for the fences like that. And that Us was something that really it kept me thinking for a long time. And even though after I saw it, I didn't have an immediate read right away, I wanted to immediately know what other people thought of it and what the reads were. And I think that like my enjoyment of the film has only been enhanced by seeing what other people saw of it after the fact. And it's something that hasn't really like left my mind either. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, my appreciation of the movie has definitely grown since my first viewing. Actually on my way to see Us for the second time, I saw a billboard for this new show called Mental Samurai. This is a new Fox game show hosted by Rob Lowe. And I don't watch many game shows, but when there's a new one, I like to check it out. So I decided to watch the pilot episode of this. And basically, people are strapped into this capsule that is on the end of like one of those robotic arms that you see making cars in factories. And basically given 5 minutes to answer questions until they get it wrong, get a question wrong. And they are rotating 360 degrees on this gimbal while they're answering questions. There's 4 different screens on either side of the the arena that this takes place in. And types of questions range from puzzles to sequences to memory to knowledge. And if you complete all the questions in the time limit, you win $10,000 and go on to the Circle of Samurai for a chance at $100,000, where there's 4 questions worth $25,000 each. Anyways, I wanted to check this out just to see what it is. I have a few notes from this. I wouldn't recommend this show to anybody. It seems weird to me how the television game show genre seems to be stuck since, like, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire kind of changed the aesthetic and the feel of those shows. And it seems to be stuck in that time, which I guess is like, 15, 20 years ago now at this point. Rob Lowe doesn't make a good toast. He's a bit generic, and it's kind of strange. The questions, like, it's weird that we went from a time where Jeopardy had these, like, I feel like challenging questions for, smart people to now on this show, people are like remembering the order of 6 different images and putting it back together. And like, I feel like 98% of the questions on the show were easy for me to answer. Not to say I'm stupid anyway, but it seems like game shows are coming down to the level of the audience rather than challenging the audience these days. Jacob, I'm wondering if you have any theory on this.
Yeah, I think people, or at least studios or networks, think people want to see people like them succeed instead of people who are smarter than them. I think Jeopardy is the only show that like prides itself on putting genuinely intelligent people on TV. I know the audition process for Want to Be a Millionaire, from what I understand, is very much leans toward, is this person a relatable character for us to follow and enjoy, to watch every man win $1 million, as opposed to, will this person actually win $1 million through knowledge? So I definitely think you're right on to something here.
Anyways, I wouldn't recommend it. Don't watch it. That is called Mental Samurai, and it's on Fox. Chris, what have you been watching or rewatching?
I rewatched Aquaman, even though I just watched it, because
this is a movie that you refused to go to the theater to see. You didn't think you were going to like it, even though you liked James Wan, and now you've rewatched it. You've seen it twice at home?
That's right, because I'm willing to admit my mistakes, unlike some people. And I really think this is going to become one of my comfort food movies, because it's so silly, but I just love how big it's trying to be. It's trying to be this huge epic, and I said this before, but this feels like a million times more epic than anything in Infinity War, which is kind of pathetic because that movie is the culmination of an entire 10 years of movies, whereas this is just really the first in a series. But this movie's trying so much harder, and it just looks so much better, and it's just a fun, enjoyable film. And I rarely rewatch movies so quickly, but I just felt like rewatching this, and I did not regret it.
I still think you're wrong about Infinity War.
No, I'm not.
You are.
I like that you always use this as a chance to just shit on Infinity War.
It
like
stinks.
He has a vendetta against Infinity War. I will say this, Chris. I had only seen Infinity War once in theaters, and then I saw it again when they did that Russo's Q&A, and I appreciate it. And not that I didn't like the movie the first time, but I don't think I liked it as much as everybody else the first time. And then when I saw it the second time on the big screen, I enjoyed a lot of things I thought I didn't like about the movie, like the Battle of Wakanda at the end of the film. I remember not liking that the first time around, and I don't know. Maybe you should go back and revisit this, Chris.
Maybe I should, but I will say this. There's this guy, his name is Patrick Willems. He has this great YouTube channel, and he's currently in the middle of this 3-part limitations of the MCU. And it's not like MCU bashing. It's him pointing out why the MCU movies are good but not great. And I would highly recommend everyone check it out because it's a really smart series, and it almost mimics like almost all of my opinions of the MCU, although I'm probably a little more negative on it than he is. But please go watch this. It's on YouTube. It's great.
Yeah, and while we're plugging MCU-related stuff, I want to point out that Slash Film's contributor Siddhant Adlaka is doing an update on a series of articles he wrote last year for Slash Film, where he's also taking a very critical eye to the MCU film by film. I'll link into the show notes, but he's more positive than Patrick's YouTube series. But if you're interested in like serious criticism of the MCU and like really diving into the politics of it, the flaws, the strengths, what makes them work, what makes them weak, there's some really good stuff out there, like beyond the regular press, and we'll link to those YouTube videos and to those articles in the show notes because it's all really worth checking out if you want to have like a serious talk about this.
Yeah, Sid's stuff is fantastic, and I love Patrick's videos, and I do want to reiterate that, he's a guy that stands in front of a bookcase full of Marvel trade paperbacks. Like, he's not a person that hates Marvel or hates the Marvel movies, and this series has been very fascinating because it has kind of outlined some of the problems I have with the MCU, like, and these are things that are, part of the comics, like the whole Stan Lee, the illusion of change, making it seem like big events are always happening every year in the lives of these superheroes, but then things just, go back to the status quo the next year. So,
there's smart things that are pointed out in the video essay for sure, and he absolutely makes valid points. But I think that some of the restraints simply apply to the medium of film as opposed to the medium of comic books. And I think that some of those similar problems you could easily equate to any other comic book movie, especially when it comes to the films of the DC extended universe.
Oh, 100%. And
not Aquaman, though.
Oh no, definitely Aquaman.
Aquaman is flawless. Please, let's.
Chris, next time I see you, I'm gonna make you listen to the entirety of that cover of Africa by Pitbull.
I've heard it. I don't mind it. It's fine. It's silly.
It's garbage.
I don't even like the original song, so I'm not gonna be like, how? Oh no, that class. I don't care. Whatever. Go ahead.
Every superhero movie needs an awesome slow-mo beach shot that looks like it's a music video in Miami.
Listen,
honestly, I would be happy if that happened.
Yeah, that would make Infinity War so much better if there was a slow-mo scene scored to Pitbull. 4 stars.
I'm dusting off the no button.
No. N-O. No.
Okay, no button unretired.
Okay, let's move on. Jacob, what have you been watching?
I finished Bodyguard, the BBC and Netflix series starring Game of Thrones Richard Madden, and it remains very intense and well made and well acted until the end, and the final feature-length episode is mostly really intense until a mind-bogglingly stupid, infuriating twist that undercuts so much of what the show is trying to say in a way that made me genuinely angry. And if you've seen the show, you may know what I'm referring to, but for a show that tries to have such an open mind and paint so many complicated matters in shades of gray, it lands on a point that is incredibly frustrating and paints something in black and white that was so comfortable in how uncomfortable it was prior to that. So Bodyguard is actually a very good show. I still recommend it. Only 6 episodes long, but I think that one of the very final choices in the last 20 minutes of the last episode left me very deflated with what the show was trying to say overall. But otherwise, I've been watching HBO's Succession. Has anybody else watched this show before I go on?
I've watched a couple episodes. For whatever reason, we didn't continue watching it. I put this on a whim. It's a HBO series the pilot's directed by Adam McKay of The Big Short and Vice, also Anchorman and comedy classics. And Succession, in a nutshell, is Game of Thrones meets Arrested Development, following a Rupert Murdoch-esque figure played by Brian Cox, who runs a massive empire of news and movie studios and theme parks and magazines. And the show starts with him losing his mind, having a stroke, and losing control of his faculties, and his children essentially struggling to control the legacy of the company and who gets to run things, and the various backstabbings and intrigue that follows. And it's very funny. It's very dark. It's run by Jesse Armstrong, who's a writer on the movie In the Loop. He worked on Veep, and the show is very funny, but it's not a straightforward comedy. These are hour-long episodes, and I found myself really caring about these characters. They're all dirtbags. They're all such shitheads. They're all people who, if this was revolutionary France, they'd all be in the guillotine immediately. They're all terrible. But the show does a really good job of balancing their dunderheaded evil decisions while creating them in 3 dimensions. So you care about their bad choices and understand how they came to be the way they are. And I'm super into it. I'm super into these bad characters. I'm super into their evil plots. I'm super into boardroom scenes that are so intense with the way people are fired and humiliated that it plays like mutilations and massacres in Game of Thrones. I'm all on board on Succession. It is a blast. Very cool. And Brad, what have you been watching?
I actually haven't been watching too much. I guess been relatively busy, or maybe I've just been terrible about watching things. So I went to see Us last week. That's something I talked about quite extensively on our spoiler discussion episode of the podcast. So I won't really dig too much into it other than just to reiterate how much that I like it and how it's such an interesting step up for Jordan Peele. Not that it's necessarily better than Get Out, but I feel like it has so much more to say. And while the complexity can make it a little bit messy at times, I think that it's the ambition is what really matters. And so much of what he's trying to do here, sometimes it feels like maybe it sacrifices some of the more logical side of creating this universe that he does in favor of telling a powerful, allegory or delivering a powerful metaphor. But I actually think in this case that doesn't detract from the story to me. I think, if anything, it's what makes it that much more interesting, and that a lot of people tend to focus on those little logical details and they take them out of the story. And I feel like focusing on that is so much of this kind of, culture we have where we need answers to everything. And I don't think that I want all of those answers. I just want to kind of get lost in this world and think about, the message and, story that Jordan Peele is trying to tell. I also rewatched Captain Marvel over the weekend, which I actually enjoyed more a second time than I did the first time. Not to say that I didn't enjoy it the first time, because I thought it was fantastic, but I think that I feel like the first time when you go into Captain Marvel, there was a lot of expectation and maybe hope that there would be more connective tissue or more of a little bit of a setup, I guess, for what's to come in Avengers Endgame and how important Captain Marvel will be in that movie. And even though we know the credits sequence delivers that, I think that this movie really stands very well on its own. And I think that it's probably one of the superior origin stories, simply because after all this time, we've seen so many origin stories that we don't have to know every little thing about Carol Danvers' past to understand what kind of character she is and what it takes for her to become this hero. We get these flashes and non-chronological pieces of her memory as we go through, and so we find out exactly the impetus for her getting these superpowers, but not necessarily all of the character traits that lead to her being who she is. But you still get this great idea of her character and her personality. And I just feel like it's very well done in that way. And then just in addition to just how it plays with your expectations as far as the Skrulls are concerned in this cosmic war and Captain Marvel's place in all of it, and her story specifically, how she overcomes these limitations that are forced upon her. It's a very relevant movie. It's very good, and if you haven't seen it a second time, I recommend doing that because I think it works even better on a second viewing.
And you've also been watching some TV?
Yeah, so I keep working through Queer Eye. I just finished the second season, and it continues to be like one of my favorite new things that I've been watching. It's just so delightful and fun. I will say I don't think that I liked the second season nearly as much as the first season. Not to say that it's bad or anything like that, or that but there's a couple episodes this season where I just really didn't care too much about the people they were making over, and the makeover in question, it just didn't make much sense to me. So like I don't know. There were just a couple episodes that I just didn't really latch onto this season, and I just felt like it wasn't nearly as heartfelt or meaningful as the first season was. But the Fab Five they're also great, and I just it's one of those shows too where you pick up tips and you get interesting ideas for stuff to do in your own house and with your own wardrobe and that kind of thing. So it's just a very enjoyable show.
Ben, what have you been watching this week?
I checked out a movie called 42nd Street for the first time. It's the 1933 musical directed by Lloyd Bacon. This is actually the first of two movies that I watched that are sort of behind the scenes of a show of some kind. So this one, I think I would recommend less than the next one. But that being said, 42nd Street is still, it's decent, but it's about this guy who is a director of a big, like a traveling musical show, and his back is up against the wall because he went broke due to the 1929 stock market crash. So the pressure is on for him to have a big hit, and it's basically the whole movie is just about him launching this show and casting this naive sort of up and coming newcomer and some of the more experienced cast members sort of battling it out, and some relationship stuff that goes on between them. Ginger Rogers is in this movie in a supporting role, and I really enjoyed her performance in it. Ruby Keeler is in it as well. It's her first movie. It's her big starring role debut, and she was really good. Warner Baxter, somebody I'd never heard of before, plays the director of the show, and he was very good as well. The movie is choreographed by Busby Berkeley, so that's probably the most notable thing about it. It's I think his 8th or 10th movie that he ever choreographed, but this movie came out in 1933. He started choreographing movies in 1930, so it's still relatively early in his career, but it's got that sort of eagle-eyed, looking down at a bunch of dancers spinning in kaleidoscopic formations and stuff that you sort of expect from the Busby Berkeley style. All of that is very much on display there. So that's 42nd Street. And the other one, the sort of behind the scenes of a show type of movie, is called To Be or Not to Be. And this came out in 1942. It starred Carol Lombard and Jack Benny. And it's about a group of actors in Poland who are basically trying to infiltrate the Nazis and trying to overthrow or subvert their efforts to destroy the country. It's very sort of slapsticky and funny. It's probably the I'm trying to think. I think it might be the funniest comedy that I've seen from this period. This, like I said, this movie came out in 1942, so it's relatively early, but yeah, Carol Lombard and Jack Benny were both very, very good in it. I think all of the movies from this era, and this also applies to Little Women, which I guess I'll talk about next, and actually the Asphalt Jungle, all of the movies from this period just sort of end. I feel like all these movies, they had a real trouble. The scripts are often terrific. The dialogue is always really good, and I'm always like, man, the stories here are just so much better than the typical stuff that we see in theaters today. But almost all of these movies this is a sweeping generalization that I'm sure there's a ton of exceptions to, but it seems like for this 30-year period in movie history, movies would just the big climax would happen and then the movie would just end. And in modern films, I feel like the big climax happens and then there's a 5 or 10 minute sort of come down after that, and then the movie ends. And that just, these movies used to just basically like slice off all of that and just bring it straight to a more dramatic end. So
that went all the way to like some of the movies in the 80s too. Like that was, I wonder how that progressed. I wonder like what was the turning point that made that not happen? Because even with like something like Karate Kid, it ends at that tournament with the close up of I think Pat Morita's face.
Yeah, and like Rocky and stuff as well. Yeah, I wonder if anybody's written about this or has read anything about this. Please send it to me, because I'd be very fascinated to read about like the way that movie endings have evolved over the years. But
hey, Ben, I don't want to interrupt you for too long. But I just want to. You triggered something I want to mention real quick.
Yes.
Which is that the difference between 42nd Street and To Be or Not to Be. The thing I find really interesting if you watch this decade of film is that a lot of those Great Depression comedies lean very heavily on the audience living in the Great Depression and knowing very well what the characters are going through at that time, which is why in King Kong the lead character doesn't even hesitate to get on a boat because it means a job, even if it means going on a boat with a bunch of random people off on a voyage. Whereas by the time you get To Be or Not to Be, which is like one of the best comedies ever made, you have literally the backdrop of World War II, where suddenly you have to be more plot driven because you literally have the world at stake, whereas all these early comedies are designed for people who want to be distracted, starring characters who are trying to survive the same plights they are without the movie actually calling attention to it. So I think it's interesting to see the evolution of comedies go from being so light and fluffy because they're about characters as desperate as the audience to being about characters who are literally trying to save the world because the audience felt the same way but during World War II.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I had not considered that. I guess moving on really quickly, I'll just sort of burn through the rest of these. I watched Little Women, which I'd never seen before, and the version I watched, there's been a ton of film versions of this and adaptations of...
and there's a new one in the works, right?
Yeah, Louisa May Alcott wrote the book, and I think Greta Gerwig is directing a new version with Saoirse Ronan later this year. The version that I watched was from 1933, and it starred Katharine Hepburn. And I would say Katharine Hepburn's performance is very good in this movie. It's directed by George Cukor, who directed a lot of movies that I've been watching over the past few months and really enjoyed, like The Philadelphia Story, and I think he directed Gaslight as well. But this movie is not great, and I don't think it's the story that's not good. I just think it's the actual version of this film that is, I found it to be lacking a little bit. Like, some of the editing choices are really bizarre. The movie sort of jumps around in time without telling you how long has elapsed between moments. It just sort of like fades almost in like a Boyhood way, but not it doesn't have, it's not interested in time in the way that Boyhood is, so it just sort of feels a little bit more jarring. But I'm definitely looking forward to watching either other versions of this. I know there's one in the 90s that my wife grew up watching, and I want to see the new one as well later this year. I think the Greta Gerwig one is supposed to come out around Christmas. But
HT, I know, is a fan of this book. Which is the best film adaptation?
Well, I've actually only seen one film adaptation, and that's the 90s one with Winona Ryder and Christian Bale. But yeah, the book is one of my favorite books of all time, and as a kid too. So it's a great story, and don't let this initial version that you've seen put you off from watching other adaptations.
Yeah, you can tell that the bones of the story are really great, and definitely worth watching. And it seems like there's almost a great version of this movie within this version of the movie. It's just not quite there yet. There's some strange choices and stuff that sort of threw me off a little bit, which I wasn't really expecting from this director, since I liked a lot of the stuff that he did before. But yeah, I would say maybe skip the 1933 version unless you're a huge Katharine Hepburn fan. And then also I watched a movie called The Asphalt Jungle, which came out in 1950. This is another film noir. I've been watching a lot of those lately. This is a heist movie directed by John Huston, and this one was very enjoyable. It reminded me a little bit of like The Naked City mixed with Rafifi. And if either of those sound interesting to you, I feel like you'll get a lot out of this movie. It was nominated for a bunch of Academy Awards, and it stars Sterling Hayden, Lewis Callern, and Gene Hagen, Gene Hagen plays Lena Lamont in Singin' in the Rain. and I don't think I'd ever seen her in anything else, and she was very, very good in this. So yeah, it's another, like, you know, it has all of the tropes of noir in terms of like the cinematography and the framing and the style and the ambiance of everything, and the heist elements are really enjoyable too. So that's the Asphalt Jungle. Again, this is another movie that just comes to an end, so be warned that happens. So yeah, that's the only I guess word of warning I would give. And then I saw Shazam, guys, the new DC movie. I did not like this movie. I'm so sorry. I know that I think Peter and HT both like it a lot. I'm
leaning more towards you. I enjoyed it, but I did not. I would probably give it like a 6 out of 10.
Oh man, yeah. I think I would give it like a 3 out of 10 or something.
Wow.
I don't know. It just did not work for me on almost any level. I think Zachary Levi is very enjoyable and good to watch. And any scene where he and Jack Dylan Grazer, who plays Freddie Freeman, the sort of superhero obsessed best friend kid, any scene where those two are sharing the screen together, I was entertained, and I thought they had a really, really good chemistry and dynamic between the two of them. But the story, the villain, the interactions between almost every other character in the movie, and the jokes and the humor.
Wait, you didn't like the family stuff? I feel like the family stuff is the stuff I like the most. Like that brought the heart.
It felt like what I feel like. It felt emblematic of what I consider to be the movie's biggest problems, which is just that it feels so forced and so like not genuine. Like I see what they're trying
completely, but
I mean, there are a couple of good sort of like fist pumping moments involving the family, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And I was sort of on board for what happens later in the movie in terms of that stuff, but like all of the interactions between the family, I was just and the jokes, I think that's the biggest thing, is like almost none of the humor landed for me in a way that this movie is desperate for it to land. And it felt like more than any other DC movie, it felt like this is the one where they were really, really like, okay, let's try to do the Marvel thing, and then they're just not very good at it. So I was very disappointed with Shazam, although I guess if in the hands of a different writer, I would not be opposed to watching, further adventures with this character. It's not like I despise the premise or don't like the lead character or anything. I just don't think that this screenplay, much like Aquaman, but I'm not going to get into that, works very well at all. So, that's Shazam. It's coming out on April 5th. So very soon.
HT, I know you were a big fan of this movie. Do you want to defend it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I disagree with everything that Ben said, because I think that the emotions were very genuine. And while it does kind of abide by a very traditional and very sort of, like throwback type of storyline, especially with the villain who Mark Strong kind of does try to do his best with, is very flat. I think that because of the performances and the chemistry with the cast, it really works. And with the boundless joy that this film kind of brings to the story, really makes Shazam work.
Well, I'm glad you found joy in it, and I think a lot of other people are going to find joy in it too. I just, it did not spark joy in me. So that's Shazam. And then finally, I rewatched two things: Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is amazing and works so well. This was only my second time seeing it, and it's just a phenomenal movie. We talked about it enough that I don't even have to really go into it beyond that. But I also finished my rewatch of the entirety of Game of Thrones, and I have all of the same problems with the pacing and the storytelling choices in season 7 now as I did when that season first aired, like whenever it was 2 years ago. But that being said, I am very hyped for the final season now, and I'm ready to dig into that and hope that they can sort of reclaim things in a way and bring the show back to the glory that it was in its earlier seasons.
Guys, I bought Game of Thrones sneakers.
You don't even like Game of Thrones.
Adidas came out with these Ultra Boost sneakers. I was at the mall about to see Us, and yes, I don't like Game of Thrones. I saw the sneakers. I like, I was like, oh, these look cool. I'm going to try them on. I didn't realize until I started trying them on because it says Game of Thrones in the sole of the sneakers. And I guess mine's inspired by like fire and something. I don't know. There's some kind of
fire and blood, Peter.
Yeah, so I bought the sneakers.
The words of House Targaryen.
It is. It has the logo in the in the flap there.
The banner. It's the house banner.
Yeah.
Featuring their sigil, Peter. All the words you don't know, but we know.
So I want to ask you guys: am I a total poser? Because
I was just gonna say yes, you are absolutely. How much of a poser do you feel like when you're wandering around with these shoes that you don't even for a property that you don't even like?
It doesn't say Game of Thrones on the outside. It just looks cool.
This reminds me of. I have a friend who he used to be part of this T-shirt subscription thing, or maybe it was a loot crate like subscription that he got for Christmas or something, and he would keep all of the shirts that he got from there. So there were days when he would wear a Doctor Who shirt, and he knows nothing about Doctor Who, nothing. And I actually got mad at him. I was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "You first of all, it's not like you're like hurting for shirts, and second of all, why are you wearing this shirt? You know nothing about it." Finally, it came around to bite him in the ass because he went to the liquor store one day, and the person who was working there loved Doctor Who and tried to engage with him about it, and he was forced to be like, "Oh yeah, totally, yeah, for sure, man, yeah,
There's this T-shirt place that Kitra likes buying T-shirts off of online, and they have these mystery grab bags where I think for like $20 you get like 6 T-shirts or something. It's like the stuff that they're trying to get rid of, but for your size. So she's done that a couple times and gotten, generally it's stuff that she likes because it's a lot of the properties they deal with are things she likes, but she's gotten like Firefly T-shirts and stuff that she hasn't watched, and she'll wear those out in public and people will come up to her and be like, "Fellow brown coat," and she'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I don't know. So yeah, I guess I'm opposed. Also, this also reminds me when I was a kid, I didn't watch sports. I still don't watch sports, but as a kid, those starter jackets were cool. So I got one of the Dallas Cowboys starter jackets just because I like the colors of the Dallas Cowboys, and then all the kids at school made fun of me for being a poser.
You know what, Peter? I'm going to give you a pass on this. I feel like you just got to embrace it. If you love the look, you love the look. Maybe this will be the thing that pushes you into actually watching Game of Thrones, but I don't know. I can always hope.
I've watched Game of Thrones. I'll probably have to watch this final season.
Peter, you're the second person in my life who's bought these shoes. And the other person is the guy who watched Game of Thrones with us every week, but always has to pause the show and say, "Who's that again? Who's that again? Who's that again?" So they made these shoes for people who collect shoes, not people who like Game of Thrones. So you know what? You're off the hook.
Well, it's also interesting too. I got them, and then when I got home, there was an ad for the shoes on Amazon. So I clicked on the ad, and the shoes were already sold out and selling for 3 times as much by the period. So I didn't even know I was buying a limited edition thing. But yeah, I guess I'm a sneakerhead now. I don't know. Okay, what were we talking about? HT, besides us, what have you been watching?
In keeping with the horror theme, I saw One Cut of the Dead, which is a Japanese low-budget zombie film that Jacob has been raving about since he saw it at, was it Fantastic Fest?
Yeah, Fantastic Fest last year.
Now, a lot of people have been like, don't say the plot of this movie. I'm
going to try not to.
Okay.
Because this is a movie that really rewards you knowing nothing about it going in. And I haven't been so pleasantly just surprised and my expectations completely upended by a movie in a while. And this was such a fun movie to just be surprised at and watch and kind of experience. I don't know how to talk about it without getting into spoilers, but I'll just say that it appears at first to be a movie about a zombie, a crew shooting a zombie film when real life zombies start attacking them. And there's a really interesting way that this is shot in that it feels like it's intentionally showing the wiring as a way of being like a satire of some sorts, but it is more than that. And I really enjoyed how it unfolds. I did it. Okay.
Where can people watch this movie if they want to watch it? I know it appeared on Amazon Prime for like a few hours and then disappeared.
Yeah. So I actually saw this at What the Fest, which is like a indie horror festival in New York that was running only for like 4 days. And that was the only time it was showing, because it doesn't have distribution yet in the States, either in theaters or online. So it's something that's kind of lying in wait right now, which is a little disappointing because this is a film that would, I feel like, become a kind of cult hit if it were more widely distributed.
Yeah, it's worth noting that it is a massive box office hit in Japan. It is like doing blockbuster numbers there. So I don't know. It surely can't replicate that here, especially I don't know how they'd sell it here. But man, there is an audience for this here. They just have to
I
find
feel like
the right
you would
way
have to
release
sell it by giving away the premise, which I'm having heard enough people on this podcast talk about this movie. I feel like I've connected the dots. But HT, what else have you been watching?
So I have also watched A Separation, which is on Netflix, and this is the Academy Award-winning Iranian film from 2011, which follows a couple trying to get a divorce when and they're like a middle-class couple, and they run into these legal troubles with another lower-class couple, and it becomes this just sort of boiler pot of class tensions and divisions, and it's a really great drama, and it's really fascinating, and this kind of delineation of what class divisions are in Iran, and like in a way that's not just like completely tragic, but in a way that's like very modern and very like sympathetic, I guess, empathetic now to like just modern times, I guess I would say. It's very good, and that is showing on Netflix right now. I also watched a Mexican film called like Water for Chocolate, which is based off of the novel by Laura Esquivel. It's a magical realism story about a girl who is forbidden to marry because of a family tradition in which she, as the youngest daughter, must take care of her mother for the rest of her life. And because of this, she falls in love with this man who ends up marrying her sister, and she puts all of her passions into her food, which kind of culminate in these magical, supernatural instances in which people can sort of experience what she is feeling by eating her food. And it's a really great magical realism movie that came out in, I think, 1992. And it's very sensual and a really great food movie if you're looking for that, because the food in this is just depicted in a way that's both delicious and sort of like sensual eroticism that this story kind of invites. So I recommend this film. It's on Hulu right now. And then I also watched season 3 of Queer Eye, which Brad has talked about a little bit with season 2. Queer Eye season 3 takes the Fab Five to Kansas City, Missouri, and it's just as good and just as heartwarming as before. It's really interesting now that in season 3, which I think is shot a little bit later than season 1 and 2, they are more aware of just kind of the impact that Queer Eye has made upon people. So there's just more of like this awareness of everything they say and do is going to be memed or is going to be like copied and stuff. And like, for example, Tan France, who's the fashion guide for the group, talks about doing the French tuck, and he's like, yes, I know everyone is making fun of the French tuck. So it's kind of like this almost meta version of itself, which I found really fascinating. And it's always fun to watch and kind of a nice thing to binge while you're either sick or something, like I might have been. Sorry for the croaky throat, guys. And I also rewatched Kung Fu Hustle, which is on Netflix now, and that is Stephen Chow's martial arts comedy classic. This is a movie I watched a long time ago when I was a kid, and I really enjoyed. But the Kung Fu Hustle on Netflix actually shows it in the original, is it Cantonese or Mandarin? It shows in the original Chinese language. I'm sorry to say that I can't really say which one it is. Cantonese, that's what it is. Okay. The original Cantonese, because the version that I saw as a kid was dubbed in English, which I think kind of lent to its almost cartoonish, Looney Tunes style comedy. And seeing it in Cantonese almost gives it like a darker tone and like brings out the elements that are a little bit more serious than I remember it being. And but I enjoyed it all the same. It's so funny and so good, and just like so over the top and stylized that Stephen Chow. It deserves its place as like Stephen Chow's widely accepted best movie. Although I have a soft spot for Shaolin Soccer, which I think is just a little bit more ridiculous and has a more of a team building effort.
A little bit more ridiculous?
Well, it does. I mean, they're both equally ridiculous.
Yeah.
Shaolin Soccer has the big climax where, you know, he kicks the ball and then it's so powerful that it blows the clothes off of everyone, and it's great. I love it.
Yeah.
So Kung Fu Hustle now streaming on Netflix, and also on, I think it's on Netflix. Also on Netflix is The Lives of Others, which is the incredible German film about this Stasi officer in 1980s East Germany who is a really loyal sort of informant and spy, and finds himself spying on this playwright and his girlfriend, and starts kind of becoming obsessed and falling in love with them, and his loyalties end up shifting throughout. And it's this incredible spy thriller that plays more like an intimate character drama, and in that way it becomes just like really taut and really gripping to watch. So that's all I have been watching this past week.
HT, how do you feel with The Lives of Others beating Pan's Labyrinth for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars that year?
I mean, they're both great films. Pan's Labyrinth is definitely my personal favorite, and I would have liked it to see it win. But I'm glad that Guillermo del Toro got his Oscar for The Shape of Water, even though Pan's Labyrinth is still my favorite of his films.
People were so mad that year.
Pan's Labyrinth is a better film.
It's still a good film, and so it's good that people were aware of it at least.
Okay, let's move on to what we've been eating. This week I learned how to cook a steak like Kiefer Sutherland. I discovered through YouTube. For some reason, YouTube recommended a video. Kiefer Sutherland apparently has a YouTube channel, which I'm not sure like who records these videos, if it's his wife, if it's his daughter or son, but he does these videos like every few months of like him cooking something, and it's like a 10-minute cooking video. And one of them was how to cook the perfect steak from Kiefer Sutherland. So I watched that video and I cooked the steak, and it was pretty good. I like the way I cook it better. It wasn't as life-changing as learning how to cook scrambled eggs like Gordon Ramsay. That we talked about that in the past on the podcast. But I will put the link to this in the show notes in case you want to see how to cook a steak like Kiefer. And you can do that in under 24 minutes. So I also discovered something, a new snack that I wanted to recommend. Dang, this company called Dang makes these lightly salted toasted coconut chips, and they come in like different sized bags. Instead of like, normal chips, these are considerably better for you. It's about 180 calories per serving, 5 grams of carbs, 2 grams of protein. If you like the taste of coconut and salt, that's basically what they taste like. And I will put a link to those in the show notes as well. But Brad, you've been eating a lot more interesting things than me. You took one for the team and tried out the Peeps cereal.
Yeah, and I definitely took one for the team here because Peeps cereal is awful. I should say I'm not the biggest fan of Peeps to begin with because I feel like they are way too sugary, and the granules of the sugar just make it feel like I'm eating a marshmallow with sand in it. Because I do enjoy marshmallows in general, and I like the kind of like chocolate covered marshmallow stuff that gets released around like Valentine's Day and Easter and Christmas, like the Russell Stover marshmallow candies and stuff like that. But not the biggest fan of Peeps, but I was intrigued enough because this is, cereal is my jam, that I just wanted to give it a shot. But it's not good. It's way too much artificial marshmallow flavor for the cereal, which isn't really a good...
Wait, so are there marshmallows in the cereal?
Yeah, there are real marshmallows in the cereal, like tiny white marshmallows. And then the cereal itself, it looks like basically pastel Fruit Loops, pink, yellow, and blue. and the flavor of the cereal itself has this artificial marshmallow flavor to it, and it's just really off-putting. And the cereal itself does not taste good, and it's just it's way too much marshmallow. Just stick with Lucky Charms if marshmallows and cereal is your jam, because this Peep cereal was not cutting it for me at all. It's one of my least favorite new cereals that I've tried. It was not good.
And you've also been eating some interesting flavored Peeps?
I did. I have a question before you finish this.
Yeah.
When you have when you buy cereal for like these experiments, what do you do if you don't like them? Do you just like not? Are they like a whole carton, or do you just kind of throw them away or something?
Yeah, it's usually a full box. I try to give the cereals that I don't like to my friends who have kids, because kids usually don't give a crap what kind of cereal they eat. So sometimes I give it away, but sometimes it's cereal that like a kid won't really enjoy, like if it's a different kind of like Cheerios or something like that. And so sometimes I end up just throwing it away because it's going to go to waste otherwise. So it's just, it's a risk that I end up taking. So I'm basically spending like $2.50 or whatever on a single bowl of cereal that I didn't enjoy. But that's just the life of liking to try new cereals, I guess.
Yeah. And that's not a huge investment, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not too bad. And honestly, like it's rare that there's a cereal that I really dislike, so it usually ends up working out, because I'm not. It's not often that I buy a whole box of cereal and then I'm like, nope, done with that. But that's how bad Peeps cereal is. So even though I don't like Peeps normally, I was very intrigued by two new flavors that I saw recently, because I just wanted to know how they captured the flavor in the form of a marshmallow Peep. And so one of them was pancakes and syrup, and the other one is root beer float. And they are okay. The flavor, it doesn't come from the marshmallow itself. The inner marshmallow is pretty much just the same as any other marshmallow. They didn't do anything to change the flavor of that. Instead, it's basically just the coating of the Peep that has the flavor, and so it's still the granular sugar covering, which I don't really like. But the flavor itself it's honestly kind of weak. The smell of the flavors is actually stronger than the flavor itself. Otherwise, it just tastes like vaguely flavored sugar on a marshmallow, which basically describes any Peep you're going to have. But yeah, so they were, it was interesting. I'm not upset that I tried them, just because, my curiosity got the better of me, but they were not necessarily enjoyable.
And you also tried some beer cheese flavored potato chips?
Yeah, so Lay's has 3 new flavors that they just recently put out, and because they've been doing a lot of crazy flavors lately. But this is part of their new, I guess it's called Taste of America, turn up the flavor thing. And so they released electric lime sea salt as a wavy Lay's potato chips, flamin' hot dill pickle, and as regular Lay's, and then kettle cooked classic beer cheese. And have you guys had beer cheese before?
No.
No.
It's actually really good for like.
What even is beer cheese?
Beer cheese is it's a dipping sauce that is made by mixing cheese with a little bit of beer.
So it's just like everything fermented.
But it's very good, actually. I've been to places where you can get it as an appetizer, and they bring like chips or stuff to dip in it. I've also been to places where they put it on burgers as a cheese sauce, and it's actually really good. So I like beer cheese just in general, and so I was curious as to how these were, and they're pretty good. The cheese flavor is there. It does have the slight beer taste that beer cheese does. And the fact that they're kettle cooked, I like more than if they were probably just the regular Lay's, because since the kettle cooked chips are more crunchy. So I'm not interested in the other two because I'm not a lime salt person, and I could care less about anything that's flavored like a pickle. So these are the only ones of those Lay's chips that I'll try. Sorry to anybody who wants me to try those other chips, but that's just not my thing.
Okay, let's move on to what we've been playing. Ben, you played a new game for the first time this weekend?
Yeah, well, it's new to me. It's called pickleball. Has anybody here ever played pickleball before?
I literally just said I hate all things pickle, Ben.
Yeah, so pickleball, I had never heard of it either, and a friend of mine and his girlfriend introduced me and my wife to it this past weekend, and it's basically it's sort of like tennis, but on a smaller court. It's almost like an in-between version of tennis and ping pong. So it's like the same basic premise where you're using a paddle to hit a ball across a net at the other players, and you're on a court that has slightly different rules, and I don't want to like get into the weeds on what the differences are in the rules and stuff, but I guess suffice it to say that this game, as far as I understood it, was basically like a lot of old people play this game. Like we played on Saturday morning and at like 9 o'clock, and there were tons of like older people out at the courts where we were. And there are like specific courts that you have to play them on. You can't just like, go to a tennis court and play it. You have to play like on a specific pickleball court. But, thinking that this was a game for old people, I underestimated how much actual physical physicality would be necessary to play this game. I really like playing tennis, and this is it's a slower paced game than tennis, but it's also and it doesn't require as much power, but it requires a lot of movement. And I've been sore. I played on Saturday morning, and I've been sore ever since today. Today's the first day that I woke up and wasn't like in pain, and I consider myself like in relatively decent shape. So,
but Ben, this is supposed to be for old people who are immobile.
No, it's not that they're not immobile. It's just for old people, and I guess it's taught me a lesson about old people who, even though they get up really, really early, it's for old people who like to stay active and like keep moving, because this game requires you to bend and twist in ways that my body has not in a long, long time. So it's a great game for anybody, not just for older people. I would recommend, if you guys are interested in, if you like playing tennis, for example, if you have a pickleball court near you, maybe look it up on YouTube. There's a couple different like how to play kinds of videos that we watched before we went out, just to make sure we had the basics of it down. And it's a lot of fun once you're actually out there, like in practice doing it. It's I am very much looking forward to playing again. So it's called pickleball, and one of the videos said that it was like the fastest growing sport in America, and I'm like, well, yeah, if it's going from 0 to 2 people are suddenly playing it, sure, it's going to be, most sports in America are like relatively well established, but apparently it's been going since like the 1960s, and there's like leagues all around and stuff. So it's not an Olympic sport yet, but it's not, I guess there's a lot of people out there who know what pickleball is. I just was not one of them.
I thought frisbee golf was the fastest growing sport.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure every one of those sports can claim that at some point, and I have no idea how you would even measure that anyway. But yeah, pickleball's a lot of fun.
By the way, I think when you have something like frisbee golf and you basically combine 2 sports into one, that shouldn't be a sport, because it's already 2 separate sports. But okay, anyways, Jacob, you've been playing some board games?
Yeah, I played a few board games, some of which I've mentioned on the show before and will mention again. But 2 ones I have not talked about that I think are worth mentioning. The first one is The Estates, which is a game of everybody playing crooked real estate developers. And the gist is that you're trying to build 3 rows of buildings in an area that's only been zoned for 2 rows. So whatever 2 rows get finished first get completed, everyone gets paid out. And whatever the third row unfinished gets demolished, along with everything you've invested in it. So it's an extremely cutthroat game of auctioning off whatever the next building is going to be, and trying to outbid each other, and being ruthless, and trying to get your buildings down in the right place at the right time, and trying to end the game strategically at a point where you succeed and everybody else fails. And it is a vicious game. I mean, I know people always talk about how, in some ways a game as boring as Monopoly is a great indication of capitalism, because the game we go around and around and around, there's only one winner, everybody else loses. Whereas The Estates, I think, captures that sort of cutthroat idea, but with an actually good game design, where everybody is just destroying each other to try to be on top. And if you have the right group of people who have thick enough skin to like not take it personally, but still get into it and like really get invested in the gameplay, we were getting so mad at each other in all the fun ways, like yelling and screaming and negotiating and bargaining. and that's the Estates. It is very fun, but like I said, also very mean, and not intended for passive or innocent players, but people who are willing to have a game where everybody's talking and negotiating and really getting into it.
Have you ever been to a game night where like it's a cutthroat game and you could tell by what is being said and what is not being said that at least one of the couples there is going home and someone's sleeping on the couch?
Oh yeah, I've been that couple. There's a game that I haven't played in a couple of years. Oh goodness, I cannot remember for life of me what it's called. A City of Horror. It is a zombie survival game where every player plays not one character but a group of characters in a zombie apocalypse. And there's only so many safe spaces on the board, and the safe spaces and supplies dwindle each round. And the goal of the game is to keep your group alive as long as possible at the expense of other players. That means either stealing their supplies, moving into spaces after they leave for them, and in some cases, like kicking them off towers into crowds of zombies. Like there's a game we played where one character was like playing like the town butcher, drop kicked a 12-year-old girl, at least the character is a 12-year-old girl, off a water tower into a crowd of zombies so he can keep his team alive. And I love this game because it's so vicious, but my wife at the time girlfriend, was so mad at me, like she wouldn't speak to me for a day. I have friends who refuse to play it. I have people who like just won't talk about that night because that game left so many bad, rotten feelings in my gaming group. But I think it's one of the best games I've ever played.
Those are great stories to talk about in retrospect, but not great at in the moment of time.
Oh yeah. The other game I played, speaking of backstabbing, is a game called Hms Dolores, which is based on a very interesting historical footnote of when ships would shipwreck on shorelines near populated areas. The local criminal element would come out and raid the beached ship and split up all the goods that were meant to be delivered and hightail out of there before the sun rises and the authorities find out. So it's a basic card game that uses the prisoner's dilemma game concept, which, if you're familiar with that, the basic idea is crystallized here into a card game where you draw 4 cards, lay them out in front of 2 players, and both players on the count of 3 can either both raise their hands in the handshake, and if they do, they split the goods evenly. If one player raises a fist and the other one does a handshake, the player who raised the fist gets all 4 cards, and the handshake gets nothing. If both players raise a fist at the same time, all cards get discarded. And there's other rules, like you can do a thumbs up to guarantee you're getting yourself 1 card, no matter whether one other person plays. But the basic gist is trying to read the other player at the table, trying to talk into them, trying to figure out what cards they want. And if you can make a deal beforehand, like sometimes maybe you don't want the cards in front of you because they won't go well with what you have. So you say, okay, let's make sure neither of us get these, or let's make sure I get one of these, you get everything else. And it's just a game's all about looking into the face of the person next to you and trying to decide if you trust them or not. Plays in 20 minutes. It's a very small card game. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, cool. That brings us to the end of today's Slash Film Daily. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast, Slash Film Daily, published every weekday on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And head on over to our iTunes page, write us a positive review, tell your friends, spread the word, and we will see you tomorrow.
Hey, Peter.
Yes, Jacob?
I have in my hands the gargantuan book of insult, offense, and effrontery by Louis A. Safian, and I've opened it to a chapter that we have yet to see on Slash Film Daily.
What is the chapter? I'm afraid to ask.
The chapter is Playgirls.
Oh, no.
God.
Is this going to affect our PG rating on iTunes?
Let's find out what Mr. Safian has planned for us.
A PG rating on iTunes?
I don't know. I'm making... I think there is an explicit rating or something.
I'm pretty sure we say the F word a decent amount.
Shh.
All right. Well, since I think Brad is first up. Brad, he can give you a bow-by-bow account of his affairs.
Yep.
Chris, he has a heart like the army, open to all men between 18 and 45.
Oh my God!
What a
Wow.
Peter, the way he flips his hips and tosses his torso, he has to be sin to be appreciated. see. Ben, he's a public relations guy. His biggest job is keeping his relations from becoming public.
Whoa.
Scandalous.
I'm trying to find one for HT that isn't like really horrible. Sorry. Oh no, I'm sorry, HT, but you've been on more laps than a napkin.
Oh my God.
Lord.
Wow.
This got real risque.
Someone alert our HR department.
I'm so sorry. This was a mistake. It's all a mistake.
Who would have thought this book would have bad things in it?